What is the most useless thing you learned in school? That I wouldn't always have a calculator with me. Joke's on you. Acid rain. Always scared me shitless as a kid, but I've yet to hear anything about it since 6th grade. Blood is blue until it is exposed to oxygen. Then it turns red. One of my kids came home the other day and shared this one. The reason it is so useless is it's wrong. Stop, drop, and roll. Not saying it isn't potentially useful, but I have so far managed to go my whole life without catching fire, and I plan on continuing that streak. In my Chinese course last year, one of the first things we learned was how to say welcome to Kentucky. None of us were from Kentucky. No, I don't remember how to say it. My son's kindergarten teacher taught all of the children sign language for simple things, like if they needed to use the restroom or get a drink. At the end of the year I thanked her because I thought it was so amazing that she was exposing them to a second language. Then she explained that she wasn't teaching them ASL. She had invented all of the signs herself. They spent who knows how much time learning fake signs that were meaningless outside of her classroom. One day in high school I thought I had it. The teacher told us what a gerund is. The ing form of a verb, used as a noun, is called a gerund. That would be the most useless thing anyone could ever learn. 10 years later I find myself accidentally in a pretty rough biker bar where I stand out like a sore thumb. The guys I was with, I was the only girl, were whispering to each other how scary this place was. Then I look up and a huge dude in a leather vest, chains, covered in tattoos comes up to me at our table. Guys I was with were all wearing button-down polo shirts and built like twigs. Guy asks me if I'd like to earn $5. I look at my friends and they're looking out the window. So I tell the guy, I usually ask for more than $5. What does he have in mind? He gestures over to the bar and says he and his buddies were just having a bet that everyone in the place was too stupid to know what a gerund is. But he's got $5 on it that I would know. I went over there, told them, and they bought me a beer. Kentucky creates 90% of US disco balls. That the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Yay, this comment got me to 10k karma. Funny story. My husband, our youngest son, and I were sitting at the dinner table bulleting one day and we started talking about plants and cells for some reason. And mitochondria came up. My husband asked me what exactly it is. And I said it's the powerhouse of the cell. And he said, yeah, I know that. But what is it? So I shouted to my teenage son's room. Figuring he takes biology he will know. I said, hey son, what is the mitochondria? And he shouts back, it's the powerhouse of the cell. New Zealand is the world's leading provider of salt due to their ratio of coastline to land mass. How to identify types of poems. Although I appreciate knowledge of the arts, this has been entirely useless so far. The current sex education system. No, most of us aren't likely to support abstinence. Please teach us what we need to know. Divorce, beheaded, died, divorce, beheaded, survived. Also known as the rhyme you learn in UK secondary schools to remember what happened to Henry VIII's wives. Can't even remember all their names, but I know the odds are they're called Catherine. I don't know if it counts, but how many of you had motivational speakers who came in to give you an assembly? I don't know about you, but these speakers were a complete waste of time. You see these people on documentaries all of the time and it makes for great TV. But absolutely none of what these people said motivated me, nor did they say anything profound. That Pluto was a planet. That I wanted to FK the hell out of my 7th grade math teacher. Any of the English, as a foreign language, phrases that aren't ever used in real life anymore. That one lone dude died of pink eye during the Civil War. I feel bad for the guy, but it was funny as hell at first. Elementary school history. Most of it is either a lie, omission of key facts, or just a completely random and useless fact. The types of soil and clay in the ground here. I mean, my last year of geography was spent entirely on studying the composition Holland's ground types, while most people in my class couldn't point out Tasmania on a map if their life depended on it. Not so much the most useless but the stupidest. Our teacher on the first day of 7th grade said we were not allowed to say bad words in English or Chinese. I went to bilingual school. This kid Ryan, who was a total smartass, and asked what bad words. So she just rattled off a list of bad words in both English and Chinese that we had all never heard of. So we wrote them down and promptly repeated them. Columbus discovering America. I can recite the prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Oldie English. Really fun at parties. Stalagmites and stalactites. I mean, I know which is from the ground and which is from the roof, but I never actually found any use for it. I had an English teacher who was obsessed with aliens. We skipped most of the curriculum and learned about crop circles and alien abductions for 3 months. My HS did one of those anti-drug motivational things in our gym. They invited a bunch of roided out strong men to rip phone books in half and bend rebar and whatnot. So, moral of the story, don't do drugs. Except steroids. Most things I feel. You're taught history but not why it's important to know it. You're taught science without anybody explaining the importance of the scientific method itself. You get sex ed but they say nothing about the importance of consent or how to not be a misogynistic douchebag. You come out of school knowing about arable farming and iambic ducking pentameter, but nobody teaches you about critical thinking, how to budget, the importance of self-esteem and social skills, or countless other things that people would generally benefit from knowing in their day-to-day life. First things first, I am not the best one in mathematics. I know that I won't use 95% of the calculus stuff that I have learned. However, I am not saying that it's useless or stupid. The one thing I really didn't understand was, why did I have to learn how to measure and calculate angles in gradient? It absolutely makes no sense to me why I have been graded on something that has not been used for decades. Even some of our other teachers were surprised that we had to learn about it. Our oldest teacher even stated that the last time he heard about that was when his father told him story from the Second World War where he had to operate the artillery. Edit. Grammar. That condoms don't work. They literally told us that. We learned the Macarena in gym class in elementary school. I can't think of anything more useless than that. I was in an elementary school in the mid 1980s that was still doing duck and cover drills in case of nuclear attack. As if ducking underneath a 1-stroke too thick piece of wood was going to save you from a nuclear blast. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. I don't know why that fact has stuck with me, but I will remember it until the day I die, and unless it comes up in a round of bar trivia or something, that fact will never serve any purpose. When I was in 4th grade, our church school used a Beaker books, super itty religious fundamentalist school books, and there was a line I will never forget from my science book, mostly because I showed everyone I could, and I quote, "Boys should not run nor girls skip rope because doing so can put too much stress on a developing heart and lead to illness." Yeah. Go to love church school. My 5th grade math teacher had us make anatomically correct hearts out of our papier mâché registered sign for 3 months instead of learning, I don't know, math. My dad was furious and went to the principal only to hear that her hands were tied because this itch of a teacher couldn't be fired, reprimanded because she had been there so long. She would also take time to sit us down on the floor to talk about menopause. Guess who sucks at math? Can I just make one point in this thread? People always talk about learning useless stuff at school and they're completely missing the point. You don't learn things in school because they're all going to be useful in your everyday life as an adult. 90% of things anyone learns at high school don't get used regularly. We learn them for 2 reasons in my opinion. 1. You don't know what you like until you've tried it. So just because you didn't go on to be a Nobel Prize winning scientist doesn't mean your classmate won't or didn't. 2. We as a society have a responsibility to pass on our collective learnings to the next generation. So yeah, I don't quote Shakespeare on a daily basis, but it's important I know that the course of true love never did run smooth. Box and whisker plots. Just why? How to make a quilt. I'll just buy a blanket KTHX. In law school, what happens if you convey a property 3 times and no one records the deed? As if I lived in England in the 1400s. An entire semester of history class was devoted to the history of the definitely important Please Remember Me state of Oklahoma. Considering the amount of time and effort that went into trigonometry, I have never once needed to use it in the 17 years since I left high school. Not saying this is fundamentally useless, just to me personally. Cursive writing. I doubt it's still a thing anymore, but as a kid who went to elementary school in the 90s, we were told in 4th grade we would need cursive because nobody wrote in print as an adult. In 5th-6th grade we were forced to do all of our work in cursive. Full stop. By middle school nobody cared anymore and most people I know stopped using it. Hell, you don't even really need cursive to sign your name anymore. Most people just use their initials, scribbles. I've always found cursive very difficult to read because people write so fast that it's difficult to decipher between certain letters and how many loops, swoops and humps there are. What was not taught that was more or less the issue. Instead of repeating the same history, science, English, and math classes year after year, why not actually teach some valuable life skills? 10th grade and we're still cranking about verbs and adverbs. That's duck in preschool crap. Why are we not learning to write resumes and letters of recommendation? Learn to write a letter to your congressman that will actually beget change. How about actually focusing on more parts of American history than just the Civil War after grade 7? And for Pete's sake, keep the darned facts consistent. It sucks when you have 2 different teachers with 2 different stories. Maybe rather than studying the endocrine system or physics for the umpteenth year in a row, maybe offer beginning HTML or beginners C++ or entry-level server administration as a equivalent. Maybe rather than home ec being just about cooking and sewing, have it be about balancing a family budget, or doing your income taxes in various scenarios. Yeah, no. Stuff you will actually use when you get older. Come to think of it, the only reason I don't consider sewing stupid is because a particular part of my special interests requires it, if the word tolux means anything to you. I learned to say my horse drinks milk in Russian during my Russian course. Learning how to play Greensleeves on the recorder. What you mean I can't add this to my resume? I had to take a class called Women Leaders. And for my final project I was asked to plan a wedding for myself under a specific budget. Homosexuals live in sin and therefore don't deserve to be mentioned with Jewish, Black, etc. Holocaust victims. Catholic school is terrible. One time a guy came in to talk to us about how to rent a billboard. He seemed rather confused and it soon became clear that he hadn't prepared a special presentation for a school setting and instead was literally running through a pitch like he was trying to sell the billboard to a company. He also was sweating profusely and had progressively larger pit stains through the session. What I learned, it costs $800 to get a billboard in Cleveland, Ohio, and you can get special rates if you make sure to rent through him. The thing is, if anything mentioned in this thread has ever come up in your life since, even as a post on Reddit, and you understood what it meant, or had context to understand something, it hasn't been completely useless. One of the most important benefits of a broad education is that everyone isn't put into a little specialist box where the only people who could possibly understand them are other specialists in that field. Instead, even though we all do specialize, we're also all able to communicate about and understand things outside our specialty. So when something important is being discussed in politics, for example, you have a good foundation to understand different perspectives, rather than just parroting sound bites without really understanding them. You won't have the detailed and nuanced understanding of an expert, of course, but you should be able to approach a moderately complex explanation without too much difficulty. I attend Catholic school. We just learned the wonders of the Catholic marriage ceremony. Let me share one of the best discussions we've had all semester. Teacher, the church encourages people to marry within the faith to have the best outcome for the marriage. Students, that sounds a little outdated, and the church seems too strict on who its members can and can't marry. Teacher, well, that's why the church has ways for couples who are not ideal candidates to get married. Students, wait. What do you mean not ideal candidates? Like who else aren't ideal candidates? Teacher, well, typically people who are handicapped are not considered candidates because of their inability to consecrate a marriage. Students, So, if a handicapped person can't have a 6 to consecrate the wedding for the sake of the church, they're not worth the value of marriage? Teacher, I'll have to check with the priest on that, but I will definitely get back to you. What the actual duck? Shout out to Catholic school for promoting discrimination and prejudice. Shocking. I can sing Jingle Bells in Latin. We had to track the ducking Iditarod, Ilaska sled dog race. We once spent an hour in art learning the correct technique to hold a pencil. My middle school teacher told me that smoke was just cool down fire, not only useless, but also wrong. The names of the it inside plant cells, yet that's gonna help me provide for a family someday and pay the bills because I know the name of the it inside a leaf. State capitals. Unless you're insanely interested in state politics, you do not need to have all 50 of them memorized. Source: have a master's in public policy and no one needs to know that it. Dates of historical events. I do not need to know the date and time of the Waterloo surrender, for example. Far more important is knowing an event's chronology in relation to other events, which was rarely communicated well because of the way lessons were divided. For me, math past middle school, The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. A teacher in grade 4 spent literally months teaching us the Hebrew alphabet. Still remember it. Still have no reason to know it. A baloo is a bear. Wuzzle means to mix. Yonker is a young man. Absolutely worthless memorization that was part of old standardized testing. I remember chanting these to memorize them for the test. Useless is sort of relative. Like I took a zoology class in high school and dissected a bunch of animals, which was cool, but as a computer engineering major it was pretty much useless but interesting knowledge. Same for like history classes. Interesting but not particularly useful to me after the class was over. So many people in this thread seem to misunderstand that school is also about giving people basic foundations and opportunities to discover things you like to learn about, and also giving people mental tools to apply things. You may never use the sentence "I would like to buy some butter" in another language, but you did learn sentence structure, and butter is a common word so it's easy to remember, thus allowing you to focus on sentence structure. Sentence diagramming is not practical in itself, but will help you become a better writer, even just in emails. You may not care to know about different types of soil, but you better be thankful that there are people who got interested in that and decided to go into agriculture and improve agricultural methods, and effectively giving you your food. Sure, some of these are weird, but none of them are actually useless. They may not be useful to you in particular, but they are useful or at least open doors to other things. Anything related to literature. I'm 28 now and haven't read a fiction book since sophomore year of high school. I haven't enjoyed a book since 4th or 5th grade. I don't get the appeal. For classes you can't actually know what the author intended to symbolize unless the author is directly asked. When I was in high school I spent 1/8 of my English classes learning to write, and the other 7/8 doing bullet story analysis. It would be nice if this ratio was reversed or 50/50, because from what I've had to read when grading papers for my students they do a really ass job of teaching people to write despite having a stronghold on pretty much all high schools. My grades increased significantly when I just skimmed the text for misogynistic quotes, and then wrote that the quote was bad and where it's from. This also worked in college for the one general elective I had to take, which was again a complete waste of time and a total waste of money. I also enjoy being judged harshly when I tell people don't read books. I don't need to find the right book. That has never worked. Nothing is useless in school. I'm proud Reddit. Mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell isn't top comment. How to take standardized tests so the school can get more money that won't benefit me anyway. Cafeteria. Eat mac and cheese, and pizza, and sloppy joes, and hamburger like Matapak. I don't know anything about taxes and how to file for things to benefit my well-being, yet I know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. High school French, in California. Just in case I wanted to move to Montreal. I know more Spanish than I do French because I hear it every day. I went to a Jewish preschool in the United States, and one day someone came in to teach us about Israel. She said that Israel is often called the State of Israel because it's such a close ally of the United States. In addition to this being completely false, it shows this woman had no idea that outside the US, the word state is synonymous with the word nation. Any anti-bullying, it was detrimental. The Dewey Decimal System. Side note, great band name. In 7th grade, my science teacher made my class dissect mushrooms. So, how to dissect a mushroom? I did 2 years of Indonesian. All I can remember is how to tell someone that I want to bathe them and how to call someone a pig. How to help someone who is not breathing. I was not strong enough to make the dummy click after trying for 15 minutes. They'd probably be dead by then. How to take apart sentences and make them into fun shapes and learn about their structure. I remember making a sentence about a dog that ended up looking like a connect the dots rocket ship. Easily Latin. Studied it for 6 years and have graduated high school in 2008. I have used it exactly 0 times in my life. And if I ever encounter a situation where I know the translation of something, I just keep my mouth shut because I don't want the company I'm with to think I'm an elitist prick. Servus serve servi servo servum servo. Servi servi servorum. Service servo service. No amount of drinking will ever let me forget about that horrible language. How to play the recorder. No way, man. Chicks love it. Most guys take a guitar to parties. I take my recorder. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Every year. All math after algebra. I have a bachelor's in computer science. Spanish. Because I already knew Spanish. I just wanted to credit I. One time our teacher was telling us about this new water heater he bought. I was like, "Who the duck is this dude?" Double quote.